Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, you all are having a wonderful day today. So, when it comes down to it, I thought, of course, that I would talk about this little video and this subject that I thought would be very particularly interesting. And this is going to be a video by that of Mr. AKHi TV. And of course, AKHi TV is talking about that of the Saul Canelo Alvarez versus Terrence Bud Crawford result, which, of course, for those of you that did not end up hearing about the results by now, Terrence Bud Crawford did end up beating Canelo Alvarez by that of unanimous decision. And just in my personal view, I actually thought the fight was a lot more competitive than what that of the commentary crew was stating. I don't think that Canelo, of course, had an argument to win the fight. I still thought that Terrence Bud Crawford clearly won the fight either 7 rounds to 5 or 8 rounds to 4. But the point overall was, which is pretty much exactly what the judges scored it. But the point overall was, once again, is that this was a big fight for both of their legacies, but especially that of a Canelo Alvarez, because if Canelo Alvarez won this fight, although he wasn't going to get quite as much credit for this fight as what a Terrence Bud Crawford was, basically overall his career would never be the same again. And if Crawford overall were to end up winning this fight, or losing this fight, of course, if he would have lost this fight, it would have definitely created a certain leeway for certain people to discredit his whole entire career. But, overall, people still would have said, well, you know what? The only loss in his career was a guy that he moved up in weight against to where he probably had no business being at that particular weight class. And although Canelo isn't really a natural super middleweight, he still was someone that was adjusted to that weight class. So it is what it is. But I stated that whoever overall ends up winning this fight, this is, of course, going to create a bridge or leeway for a lot of the fans, of course, to talk their shit. No matter how realistic, of course, those narratives are, or no matter overall, once again, how unrealistic those narratives are. And we all know that the LDBC and new media, of course, that they do not like Canelo Alvarez. So, of course, what the narrative is going to be about Canelo, especially for the next several years, is that although he was a great fighter, he was someone that ducked almost every big fight in his career, got a whole bunch of robberies, all sort of stuff, which of course is not the case. Canelo has a great resume, and of course he's someone that took on a lot of big names that many other people probably would have not been willing to take. Now, is that me claiming that Canelo, of course, is not without his controversy, like the steroids or, ducking the David Benavidez fight or doing other things? No, not necessarily. But the point overall is that whoever was going to lose this fight, it was going to open up the doorway for a certain amount of the fans to basically talk shit on that particular fighter for the next several years and basically claim whatever they want to. Because, of course, for a lot of the Canelo Alvarez fans, they basically kind of almost have to shut up for now, at least for a certain amount of them, because Canelo ended up losing to that of a Terrence Bud Crawford. So, of course, the criticism is going to be that much more glaring for that of a Canelo Alvarez. And I'm someone overall, once again, that at least on my channel, that I do keep the same standards, and I'm someone overall that is a man of my word. Like I stated, if Crawford ended up winning this fight, he would be remembered, in my personal view, as the clear best fighter of this era. The only other fighter, to be quite honest with you, that you can probably now debate was the best of this era is either Terrence Bud Crawford or Alexander Usyk. There's really not a debate with any other fighter. Now, of course, certain other people may say that of an Naoya in a way, but in a way, in my view, he's kind of a tweener. He's not someone that is exactly a part of the same generation of a Usyk and that of a Crawford. He's kind of a little bit after it. He's almost kind of like that of an Andre SOG Ward. Like he was, kind of in the middle of the Mayweather and the Crawford era. He was someone overall that was kind of in the middle of it, not exactly in either of their eras. But anyways, the point overall is, of course, is that AKHi TV, he's going to be talking a certain amount on Canelo Alvarez. But the question is about Canelo Alvarez. Where does he go from here? Because, of course, after he ended up losing to that of a Terrence Bud Crawford, as I already stated, and of course, I talk about things from certain fans' perspective, and I talk about things from my perspective as well. According to the fans' perspective, of course, people may say overall that Canelo Alvarez, that he's super overrated or that he's someone that never belonged at the number one pound for pound spot, all this sort of stuff. Listen, Canelo, from the realistic perspective, he is an all-time great level fighter. He is someone overall that at one point in time did deserve to be the number one pound for pound fighter. But that being stated, Canelo Alvarez can never, ever, ever, ever be debated as the best fighter of his generation. After this, he just can't. Even if you personally believe that Canelo Alvarez was not at his absolute best within this fight, or even if you thought that Terrence Bud Crawford was at better form for this fight. And I mean, maybe one could debate that, but in my personal view, they were both at comparable points in their career. So to me, I cannot really make that major excuse for that of a Canelo Alvarez. I did state that heading into this fight that in my view that Canelo Alvarez did clearly have the more wear and tear out of both fighters. But the fact that Terrence Bud Crawford had not fought in over a year, the fact that he was 38 years old, and the fact that he was moving up 2 weight classes to a weight that he had never been before, and Canelo had been adjusted there for years, I mean, there pretty much is no major excuse for Canelo Alvarez. It just is what it is. He ended up losing, and even if you believe that Canelo Alvarez was not at the absolute peak of his career, Terrence Bud Crawford was not at the absolute peak of his career either. I don't think that either of them were at the absolute peak of their career, but either way, they were at comparable spots. And what this means for Canelo Alvarez is that he can never be remembered as the best of his generation, and he can never be put, in my personal view, on the same level as guys like a Roberto Duran, as a Sugar Ray Leonard, and certain guys like that. He just can't be put there. It is what it is. He's someone that, in my view, can be put on the same level as, say, someone overall maybe like a Tommy Hearns or a Bernard Hopkins, or certain guys like that. Guys that, of course, were great fighters and all-time great level fighters, but would lose certain big matchups in their career, but could never be, in my personal view, debated as the best of their era. But they could be debated as, like, top 5 pound for pound of their era. But Canelo Alvarez, in terms of the comparisons to Terrence Bud Crawford and an Alexander Usyk, that's gone now. There's no debate about that anymore. It just is what it is. But anyways, the point overall is that AKHi TV is going to talk about it a little bit, and I'm going to talk about, in my personal view, where Canelo Alvarez deserves to be ranked right now, and if he still is quote-unquote the greatest Mexican fighter of all time, or if he's someone that's still an all-time great level fighter. But anyways, that being stated, let's get into the video. Let's see what Mr. AKHi TV has to say.
If you can, compare and contrast the fight between yourself and Floyd Mayweather Jr. and tonight's bout with Terrence Bud Crawford, if you can.
No, I think Crawford is way better than Floyd Mayweather.
Just to respond to Canelo Alvarez's comment there, do I believe that Terrence Bud Crawford is way better than Mayweather? No, personally, I do not. I think overall that Mayweather actually is a better all-around fighter than that of a Crawford. That being stated, Crawford did something that I don't even think Floyd ever did. Now, Floyd did beat fighters that were 20 pounds bigger than him, but at least he had been adjusted to 154 and adjusted to a lot of those weight classes that he had fought at. I don't think Mayweather, I mean, maybe I'm wrong about that. Maybe he actually did move up 2 weight classes to fight Oscar De La Hoya. I guess that would have been kind of comparable, but Oscar De La Hoya was, he was kind of a guy, first of all, that I don't think was as skilled as a Canelo Alvarez even on his worst day. And then second of all, overall, when you talk about Oscar De La Hoya, he was kind of, very much on his last legs. Now, I think that Canelo was somewhat on his last legs as well, but he was at a better point in my personal view than what Oscar De La Hoya was, kind of when Floyd had beat him. But, I mean, it's debatable. Canelo Alvarez, in order for these exchanges to work, he was not overall just going to have to stand there and just use the high guard. He was going to have to use great upper body movement and also to kind of get in and outside of the range like what he did against the Danny Jacobs. And although I didn't expect him to do that to the same degree as what he did against the Danny Jacobs, because he has not really fought, kind of in that way in years, at least to anywhere near to the same degree of sharpness or anywhere near to that same level. But the point overall is that Canelo Alvarez, in order for him to beat Terrence Bud Crawford, in my personal view, what I bet on was that I did not think that Crawford's power was going to be effective enough against Canelo Alvarez. And it was very obvious that from the first round onwards, that Canelo Alvarez must have felt something. Because Terrence Bud Crawford, he was having that lead hand in Canelo Alvarez's face. And if you even have a lead hand in Canelo's face, although he does have problems with a great lead hand, he's still someone overall that can get around it to a degree, especially if he does not respect your level of power, and especially if he does not overall respect, that's your size maybe. But Terrence Bud Crawford, he looked great overall for being at 168 pounds. I don't know necessarily what he rehydrated to, but he looked like overall that he could have at least been a natural middleweight in there. He was someone overall that actually was comparable in terms of size with the Canelo Alvarez. Now, of course, we do have to still claim that Canelo Alvarez had the size edge because he was adjusted to the weight class. But let me also give Terence Bud Crawford this credit. And once again, this is no excuse, for Canelo Alvarez whatsoever, but this just goes to show you that not only is Terence Bud Crawford the better all-around boxer than that of a Canelo Alvarez, although I still thought Canelo gave it a good go, but Terence Bud Crawford in terms of athleticism, although yes, I do have my suspicions of the snack program, the point is that I'm not quite sure if guys like Roy Jones, overall did it 100% legitimately either, because we all know that he kind of gained a certain amount of muscle mass within a very short amount of time when he fought John Ruiz. But the point overall is that Terence Bud Crawford, even just in terms of an all-around athlete, like he literally has to be up there with anybody that I've ever seen for an all-around boxing athlete. Floyd Mayweather, Rocky Marciano, overall, Roy Jones Jr., he has to be up there with anybody. It takes an all-time, not just an all-time great level fighter, it takes an all-time great level athlete, like someone that is just built very special to move up 2 weight classes simultaneously, even take a year overall to adjust to that, and still overall fight quite competently there. So I have to give Terence Bud Crawford a lot of credit for that. I have to give him a lot of credit overall, for packing on the weight in a very good degree, and on top of that, really handling the weight, to a great point. Now, he did look more tired overall, pretty much what I had guessed in the fight. There were still a lot of things that happened in the fight that pretty much I had predicted, but that being stated, Canelo just was not able to get to Terence Bud Crawford enough, and he was going to have to get past that lead hand or try overall to get past it in the first part of the bell or the first part of the fight. And Canelo Alvarez overall just was not willing to do that. I think that he was a little bit too respectful of Terence Bud Crawford's lead hand, and I understand. But Canelo Alvarez was going to have to risk it to get the biscuit. And I did state overall that sometimes that Canelo, although he will get inside the range and try to mix it up, and he tried, he tried his best in the second half of the fight, but he just gave up, overall too many rounds, or made the rounds too close in certain particular rounds to the point overall to where he just was not able to get past Terence Bud Crawford's lead hand. It just is what it is. He was not able to do it, and he was going to have to try to do that. He did mix up certain punches, but he was going to have to try to throw certain combinations. It was obvious that Canelo Alvarez thought that he was going to be able to do enough by being patient and overall pretty much either out-countering Crawford or overall pretty much by doing one shot at a time. And he was going to have to do a little bit more than that in this fight. And I thought that Canelo overall, once again, was going to try and do that. And by the time that he did try to do that, it just wasn't enough. Canelo Alvarez needed to throw more within this fight. I think that there's a possibility that maybe he could have wore Crawford down had he threw more within this fight, but he just wasn't willing to. And the reason why he wasn't willing to was because Crawford's lead hand was giving him problems immediately within the fight, and he was not willing to get hit with that lead hand in the early part of the fight to possibly make Crawford pay, even if it only meant hitting him on the arms. And he was trying to accuracy that of a Terence Bud Crawford or out-counter him within that of the mid-range at times to the point to where he even was backed up. And at times he actually was able to out-counter Crawford. But that game plan was never going to work over a 12-round basis, ever. Excellent left hand by Terence Bud Crawford. I also stated that for this fight, that although I did not think that Canelo was going to tire out quite as much as what some people thought, he definitely did tire out in the second half of this fight. But let me actually also state this. I actually don't think that Canelo fatigued quite as much as what some other people say. I just think that Canelo Alvarez basically did whatever he could for this age. I think that he actually threw a certain amount, of punches, or a great volume of punches for his age, and someone that overall has never really had great stamina. I think that he pretty much did whatever he could do against the Terence Bud Crawford. But that being stated, the problem was is that, although he did land 500 punches against Jaime Munguia, or, he threw 500 punches, excuse me, overall, it was a little bit easier because Munguia was also running into a certain amount of his shots. And it's a lot easier overall, to hit someone that A, is a bigger target, and then on top of that, someone that is just going to run into some of your shots. Terence Bud Crawford was not going to do that, and in order for Canelo to win this fight, he was going to have to try to wear him down very early, and he was going to have to really try and take charge. And Canelo just did not do that enough. He needed to really show the judges that I'm here to take charge, that lead hand is not going, overall to implement my game plan in any way, and that I'm going to be able to get through the guard. And even if he does get me in the first parts of the fight with certain shots, I'm eventually going to be able to wear him down. And Canelo overall just did not do that.
So Canelo Alvarez, who was labeled as the greatest Mexican fighter of all time by old media, everyone knew when Crawford fought.
Well, here's my question to Mr. AKHi TV. AKHi TV will one day claim that Canelo was only labeled as the greatest Mexican fighter of all time by old media, and then AKHi TV will then go on to claim that yes, Canelo is the greatest Mexican fighter of all time because we need him to be the greatest Mexican fighter of all time so we can put Crawford on a very high level. My point is this. As anyone that has seen my channel overall, I kept my word and my standards about Crawford if he ended up winning this fight. But the thing is that, overall, if we were going to go on these narratives, then at least be consistent. So my point overall is this. Is Canelo the greatest fighter of all time or not? Because these guys, once again, one day will claim that Canelo isn't even on the level of a Barrera. He's not on the level of these guys. Then all of a sudden, now that Crawford wins, and you know that Canelo is not going to be the greatest of his generation, but he's going to be a great name to add to Crawford's resume, all of a sudden, he's clearly the greatest Mexican fighter of all time. Like, come on, man.
Canelo that it was only a one-way street. Crawford was only going to get the credit if he wins, not Canelo, because he was.
And basically what that's AKHi TV's way of saying is that if Canelo would have won this fight, he would have not gotten shit from me. That's really what AKHi TV overall is stating. And I believe AKHi TV because those are consistent with his standards.
The one taking the risk.
Now, of course, Crawford definitely did deserve more credit for the win than that of a vice versa. But the point overall is that Canelo, in my view, also would have deserved credit, in my personal view, had he won the fight, because he still would have beaten an all-time great level fighter, someone that is a great all-around fighter, but of course he was not able to do it.
Of moving up multiple weight classes, even though he doesn't have to. He's 38 years old. He's pound for pound number one. He knocked out all of his rivals. This was basically a side quest for Crawford.
Well, I'm not going to say that Terence Bud Crawford knocked out all of his rivals, but he did beat two of the guys, or at least the majority of the guys, that people overall really needed him to beat. Crawford, in terms of a resume, is never going to have as much of a resume as, say, a Sugar Ray Leonard or a Manny Pacquiao or a Floyd Mayweather. But as I stated, now that he got this win over Canelo Alvarez, it really doesn't matter because Terence Bud Crawford was able to accomplish something and do something that he probably never should have been able to do in the first place. And then on top of that, he's the first man to become undisputed in 3 separate weight classes in the 4-belt era. I mean, apparently Henry Armstrong did it, a very long time ago, but I believe that was when they only had 1 belt per weight class. But, anyway.
A quest to becoming a top 5 of all time by dethroning the 7-year reigning undisputed champion Canelo Alvarez, who was 2 times undisputed at that weight. Canelo was at the peak of his prime.
Well, no, he was not. That's another thing overall that I gotta check AKHi TV on. He tried to make this fight seem like Terence Bud Crawford, that, he has all the disadvantages and blah, blah, blah. Listen, at the end of the day, the truth does have to be said. Canelo Alvarez had more wear and tear on him than Terence Bud Crawford. Now, if this still would have even been the same Canelo that fought Danny Jacobs and those guys, would he have beaten out of a Crawford? I'm not really quite sure about that. I don't know. It's possible. But the point is that Canelo was still supposed to win this fight, even with some of the wear and tear that he did, have. And it's just a little bit hard for me to claim definitively that he would have won overall, because Crawford, I still thought, looked great within this fight. Now, maybe had it been the Canelo, say, from the Danny Jacobs fights or the Billy Joe Saunders fights, would he have won? I mean, maybe. But he still would have had to have thrown more combinations and try to get past that lead hand. And Canelo, at times, one weakness that he does have, as I've already stated, is that sometimes he admires his work a little bit too much in terms of his movement. He'll move around to a great degree, but then he won't punch in between the shots as much as what he needs to, and we've seen that within this fight.
Said he was the pound-for-pound king. Canelo said he was in the best shape of his life. Canelo said he was unbeatable at 168, along with...
Right, that's great, Mr. AKHi TV, and Terence Crawford deserves a lot of credit. But let's not try to sit here and do this bullshit that Canelo, at 35 years old, already been fighting for 20 professional years, and someone that clearly has been slowing down for the past few years, basically stated by everybody overall that he was just at the absolute peak of his career. Let's stop.
Media alike. Until Canelo said the word smoke and Bud popped up with the saying Bud giving Canelo some, Canelo got high as hell. He almost went out at the end of the fight against Crawford. You see, Canelo did this to himself by avoiding the Mexican monster Benavidez for over a half a decade. He messed around and ran to Bivol. Then he messed around again and ran to Crawford, away from Benavidez. You see, Canelo didn't want to pass the torch to his countryman Benavidez. Luckily for Crawford, this was more than an eclipse. The stars aligned. He became a free agent. He got the Errol Spence fight. He won in a spectacular fashion. Then, Turkey came to the equation. Canelo had no plan B. He ran out of fighters to cherry pick. Then Turkey proposed the Crawford and the Benavidez fight to Canelo. However, Canelo declined both Benavidez and Crawford fights. He said he wanted $150 million to fight either one of them.
Well, in my view, that was Canelo Alvarez's right. At the end of the day, he was the face of boxing. I'm not quite sure if he is anymore, but he overall was the face of boxing. He gave boxing a lot of great fights. He was entitled to his money. That being stated, it was very obvious that Canelo Alvarez, that he was avoiding David Benavidez. It is what it is. And yes, Crawford, before that fight happened, he was at least going to have to win a belt at 154, because there was no way that Canelo was going to fight a guy moving up 3 separate weight classes. There was no way. There was nothing in it for him.
Luckily for Canelo, Turkey gave Canelo exactly what he was asking for, $150 million to fight Crawford. That's when Canelo thought, okay, I can fight Benavidez, who's 25 pounds bigger than me, or I can fight Crawford, who's 30 pounds smaller than me.
Terence Bud Crawford is now 30 pounds smaller than that of a Canelo Alvarez, and that's very apparent taking a look at how well he handled that weight. It's very obvious that Terence Bud Crawford, that when he rehydrates in the ring, that at least at the welterweight class of 154, that he can handle 170 quite well. Now, that being stated, Canelo obviously is someone that is built bigger. He's someone that is built girthier. He's someone overall, of course, that is the naturally bigger fighter. But as I've already stated, these guys are more separated by about 1 or 2 weight classes. And I understand that certain people overall will claim, what are you talking about? All sorts of stuff. Listen, Crawford is someone that even at 140 was rehydrating at 160 pounds. So Crawford has been a natural welterweight, or, even possibly around a 154 pounder for a while. So, I mean, it just is what it is. And Canelo was someone, of course, that adjusted to 168, but he was someone, overall, once again, that is not really a natural super middleweight, especially for his height and size.
It's like Jamel Charlo and even smaller. So he picked the wiser option, Crawford. At least that's what he thought. Until Crawford went Super Saiyan on his ass. Well, for the people that don't know, when Canelo moved up to his 4th weight class for the second time, light heavyweight, to fight this time Bivol instead of Kovalev, do you guys know, after Canelo lost to Bivol, even though Canelo said, I believe I won 8 rounds to 4, do you guys know Canelo Alvarez had to talk to a therapist? That's right.
Well, of course, when you talk about these fighters that end up losing some of the biggest fights in their career, they become massively depressed after that. And I promise you that Canelo Alvarez, he knows what this loss means for his career. And I guarantee that more than likely that he's probably going to ask for a rematch, but I don't think that a rematch is going to look that different. I think that Crawford is going to look even more comfortable than what he did within the first fight. And in order for Canelo to win a rematch, he would have to establish a jab a little bit more, in my personal view. And overall, he would try to at least have to get around, overall the lead hand a bit more. I wasn't really surprised that Canelo didn't, establish his jab as much as what he did. Canelo is someone that, when he finds someone with an elite level jab, he's not always going to try to out jab them. But the point overall is that Canelo Alvarez, at the very least, was going to have to try to get around that lead hand, maybe even take, a shot from that lead hand and then try to get Crawford on the inside and have the courage to wear him down. But Canelo did not do that.
Canelo was so devastated by the loss. He was so hurt, mentally and physically, to the point where he needed a therapist to get over the Bivol loss.
Of course. And that's why overall, once again, when you take a look at a lot of these fighters that once they retire from boxing, especially if they were known for losing a lot of the bigger fights in their career, they can't mentally handle it. Like George Foreman ended up retiring shortly after he lost to Muhammad Ali for like 15 years or something like that, or like a very, very long time. When you talk about overall Mike Tyson, he was not able to handle the loss extraordinarily well. Deontay Wilder, of course, we heard him make 365 excuses when he lost to Tyson Fury. Overall Fury, of course, although he didn't take it quite as hard, he still made excuses a little bit against Alexander Usyk, or at least stated that he thought that he had won the fight. Miguel Cotto, I don't think that I ever heard him make excuses, but he was someone overall that, or at least not any major excuses, but he was someone that had tattoos because he needed to be a new person after he suffered those first losses. He needed to, it's very traumatic for a boxer to lose some of the bigger fights in their career because they start thinking in their mind, am I good enough? Am I a loser? Am I someone that cracks under pressure? Am I just not as good as what I thought I was? And Canelo Alvarez is a fighter that has been training basically every single day for the past 20 years. He's been someone that has been really working on his craft. So for all this to come crashing down just to lose to Terence Bud Crawford, yes, it's very devastating for Canelo Alvarez. And I would not be surprised if we see future reports of, just like with Oscar De La Hoya or Ricky Hatton, of Canelo Alvarez getting invested in overeating or alcoholism or drugs or something like that, because his career is never going to be looked at as the same again. It just is what it is.
Hello, is anybody home? Did you guys know that? Hey, Canelo, payday. You want payday? That's right, I want a payday. I'll be your therapist. Trust me. In fact, I give you a little session right now. Canelo, keep your head up. You're the greatest Mexican fighter of all time. Look in the mirror and keep your head up. You have nothing to be ashamed of.
Well, once again, AKHi TV, we have to go overall once again according to certain standards. But once again, this doesn't really surprise me because AKHi TV changes its standards on a daily basis. But of course, this is going to make AKHi TV look very good, as well as a certain amount of the other people that predicted Canelo Alvarez to lose to that of Terence Bud Crawford. That being stated, and I'm someone that overall definitely probably overlooks certain things, but I think overall the thing that probably surprised me the most, and I'm someone that does get the majority of my predictions in sports correct, especially in boxing. But the thing that really surprised me the most about, overall this fight was just how well Crawford was really able to handle the weight. I did not think that he was going to be able to handle the weight as well as what he did. And he clearly, obviously, wasn't quite as quick as what he was overall. But I mean, he was definitely quick enough. He was around as quick as what he was in the Errol Spence Jr. fight. And I did not really think that he was going to be anywhere near that quick. But some fighters overall, for whatever reason, they just, can kind of do that. And I mean, sure, I do have some suspicions about the snack program. But I mean, Canelo Alvarez also has been caught on suspicious PEDs in the past. But overall, the point also is that even if we want to criticize Crawford about allegedly being with the snack program, there are still certain fighters that even when they're on steroids and they gain weight, they don't handle the weight quite as well. Like even Canelo Alvarez against Bivol, if you believe that it's possible that Canelo was on steroids for the Bivol fight, Canelo tried to gain muscle mass and weight for that fight, and it clearly worked against him.
Look outside, you're gonna see $1 billion worth of stuff that you own. The hell you ashamed of? You fought Crawford, you made $150 million.
Right, but that's not what Canelo Alvarez cares about. Canelo Alvarez is someone where boxing was his whole life. Canelo Alvarez was someone that trained every single day. Someone like a Canelo Alvarez or a Terrence Bud Crawford, they don't take a look overall at a loss, like some other fighters. Like when George Kambosos ended up losing to that, of a Devin Haney, I think that he took it a lot better because I'm not claiming that he doesn't train hard or that maybe that he does not look at himself as a great fighter. But I don't think that he looks at himself in the same way that a Canelo does. Canelo looked at himself in the mirror and said, I have the potential to be in the debate as the greatest boxer of all time, or at least the top 10, of all time. And Canelo Alvarez can no longer look at himself in the mirror, in my personal view, and say that. It just is what it is. So this is going to be very devastating for Canelo Alvarez, unfortunately, but hopefully for him, he can realize that he did accomplish a lot in his career, that he was an all-time great level fighter, that he still is on the level of many all-time great level fighters, such as that, of a Tommy Hearns and other guys like that. But, he's just not on the level overall of what he wanted to be. It just is what it is. It's unfortunate for him, but that's just the way that the cookie crumbles. He was not as good as Floyd. He was not as good as Crawford. I mean, the Bivol fight, obviously, he really didn't belong there. So, I mean, I'm not really going to go as much into that one. But if Canelo Alvarez was on the same level as certain guys like a Sugar Ray Leonard and like a Crawford and a Usyk and a Duran and certain guys like that, he probably could have beat Bivol as well. But he's not on those guys' level.
You robbed the bank, Canelo. You just couldn't rob Crawford on the judges' scorecards. You can't have it both ways. Is that what you wanted, Canelo? Come on, man. For an extra session. That's a whole nother payment, Canelo. All jokes aside, this is what most likely Canelo Alvarez is doing as we speak. The $1 million question is, how is Canelo dealing with the Crawford loss? Especially...
Well, he's definitely not dealing with it very well. Of course, Canelo Alvarez, and I'll give Canelo his credit, he gave Crawford overall the greatest amount of credit that he could. I'll give Canelo a lot of credit, but of course, this is going to bother him because, he's never going to be looked at overall on the same level ever again. And it just is what it is.
When this is by far his most embarrassing loss. Why is that? It's because obviously he got beat by a welterweight while being a freaking almost a light heavyweight. How, Sway? How?
Well, I have to assume that Terrence Bud Crawford at the very least can probably fit at around 154. Because the fact overall that he was able to handle that weight so well, I mean, maybe overall he can just gain weight like that and still retain it. And obviously that's a part of it. Don't get me wrong. He still did move up 2 weight classes. But overall, Terrence Bud Crawford, I'm not sure what his fight night weight was. But, it definitely was the right weight for him.
Canelo said Crawford ain't beat nobody. He ain't fought nobody. Then Crawford made him look like a nobody. Like Crawford said, anybody can be a nobody. And he made him a nobody come fight night.
I'm not going to claim overall that he made Canelo look like a nobody because I still thought that Canelo had a lot of competitive moments. And I thought that he still pulled out a good 4, maybe 5 rounds. Although, of course, a lot of people would heavily disagree with me on that. But even when you take a look at the punch totals, Crawford did not outland Canelo Alvarez by this vast amount. He still overall, I believe, only outlanded him by a total of 16 punches. And Canelo was actually the more accurate of the 2 fighters. But just being the more accurate of the 2 fighters doesn't mean that you're going to win the fight. And I thought that overall, and I stated that in order for Crawford to win this fight, he was going to have to throw a decent amount more than Canelo Alvarez, and he did. He threw at the very least 100, if not 200 more punches than that of a Canelo Alvarez in order to win this fight. He was going to have to do that, and he did that. But I was wondering about how often he was going to be able to do that with the combined power and size of a Canelo Alvarez, and with him gaining the weight, possibly becoming slower. But it really did not appear to affect Crawford's speed whatsoever, at least his hand speed.
Which I told you guys, that's exactly what Bud was going to do. Now you start wondering if Canelo needed a therapy session or sessions for the Bivol loss. How many therapy sessions he's going to need to get over the Crawford loss? And will he ever be the same?
Well, I'm not quite sure if Canelo Alvarez is ever going to get over this loss. I mean, it's going to take him a very, very long time. in order for him to get over the Terrence Bud Crawford loss. And to be quite honest with you, certain boxers, they never get over certain losses. Like Manny Pacquiao overall is someone that does not accept losses very well. Deontay Wilder still to this day is not accepting of the Tyson Fury loss. It just is what it is. You know, when you take a look overall at Anthony Joshua, he was not accepting at first overall of the Alexander Usyk losses. He could not accept it. You know, when you take a look at other fighters, they were not accepting, you know, of the loss. Vasily Lomachenko over Teofimo Lopez, you know, or certain fighters like that. So, I mean, it takes fighters a long-ass time. George Foreman over Ali, to the point where, to be quite honest with you, they either become addicted to certain things that they shouldn't, like drugs or alcohol or certain things like that. Some of them even borderline become suicidal, like that of a Ricky Hatton, who unfortunately, of course, recently passed away, rest in peace. But Ricky Hatton, for those of you, of course, that did not hear, Ricky Hatton was someone that already kind of had some issues with substances, like that of food especially, but he was someone overall that after he lost to Mayweather, he was never mentally the same ever again. And he became heavily suicidal after that because he felt like a failure.
As when fighters lose to Terrence Crawford, they usually never the same. I hope that's not the case for Canelo, but it's a
Well, taking a look at Canelo Alvarez, in my view, he probably could come back, but I mean, he's never going to be looked at as the same again. So I think in Canelo's eyes, that the only match that he'd probably want at the current moment in time is the rematch against Terrence Bud Crawford. And if he can't have that, then I think it's pretty much best for Canelo Alvarez to pretty much hang him up. I mean, you pretty much proved everything that you could do, you know, overall within boxing. I think that he's still on the level of certain guys like that, of a Tommy Hearns and a Bernard Hopkins and certain guys like that, you know. But I mean, he just can't be any higher than that in my personal view. I mean, I guess maybe one could debate that he is someone on the Duran level, because Duran was someone that did lose a lot of fights that, to be quite honest with you, he probably shouldn't have. But at the end of the day, overall, in my view, I think that Canelo, just in my view, I don't think that he can quite be on that level. I don't think that Canelo, after this fight, can ever be debated on the top 10 level. He just can't be. It is what it is. And to be honest with you, I don't think that he can ever be debated. Well, maybe, but I'm not quite sure if he can even be debated on the top 20 level. You know, because not only did you lose to Mayweather, who was smaller than you, but you also lost, you know, to that of a Terrence Bud Crawford. So, I mean, it is what it is. Although Crawford definitely was a lot more comparable in size than what a Mayweather was, obviously. But, I mean, you know, anyway.
Possibility. If Canelo mentally was defeated to the point he needed a therapy session for the Bivol loss, imagine what he's going to need for the Crawford loss, when this is by far his most embarrassing loss. Yeah, Canelo has a couple robbery wins, but if you're only talking about his...
No, Canelo Alvarez really does not have a couple robbery wins. But that's going to be one of the narratives that, you know, once again, that people overall, that they spread for a very, very long time, because once again, they're going to look that much smarter probably than what they actually are, because they predicted Crawford to win the fight. But, you know, I've already stated this, and people may say, well, you predicted Canelo to win the fight. AKHi TV got his right. You didn't, and that's correct, and I give AKHi TV a lot of credit for that. But if we're also going to be real, especially about a lot of these LDBC and new media channels, is no offense, but there's a reason why they've gotten the majority of their fight predictions wrong, including that of the Benavidez Morrell fights, including that of the Benavidez, you know, Demetrius Andrade fights, including that overall of the Wilder Tyson Fury, you know, last two fights. When it comes down to it, I mean, it's very obvious overall who they're picking and why they're picking them. It just is what it is. But anyway.
Losses, that's Floyd, Bivol, and Crawford. At this point, you would assume that Canelo would be an expert at losing and knowing how to deal with it, since that's what he's famously known for, is losing to Floyd Money May. That's how he became popular.
Well, no, Canelo Alvarez became popular before even the Mayweather fight. It's just that he was on the undercards of a Mayweather. But, of course, AKHi TV has used this point overall to kind of degrade that of a Canelo Alvarez, you know, overall for a very long time. But the thing is that Canelo was a star, you know, just not quite a superstar before he fought Floyd. But there's a reason why Floyd's numbers went highly up, especially against Canelo, because they knew the great talent that he was.
Superstar. I kid you not. Canelo became a superstar getting smoked by Floyd. I never seen it before. He was famously known for losing, and then avoided every slick black American fighter that was undefeated like Jamal Charlo since then.
Well, no, actually, he really didn't. and they actually tried to make a fight with Jamal Charlo, although this isn't, a part of the AKHi TV and these guys' narrative. They actually tried to make a fight with Jamal Charlo. Jamal Charlo, I believe, had turned it down. He turned the deal down. And overall, you can ask the Charlo brothers about that. The Charlo brothers will tell you that. I believe even Jamal Charlo had said that at one point in time. So it is what it is. Golden Boy and Oscar, they offered him something, and he ended up turning it down. It is what it is. Now, do I believe that Canelo did kind of, weasel out of the Andrade fight? Yes, but I can't really blame Canelo that much for that because at the end of the day, overall, Andrade was someone that was highly dangerous, and he was someone that really just did nothing in his career. The point overall is that if you're someone like an Andrade, someone that's already looked at as dangerous, and you already don't have any appeal to the main fans, you have to do something in order to try to make yourself appeal. But he would just make such dumbass decisions. Like, he would turn down the Charlo fight. He kept signing with Top Rank. Then overall, like, he would turn down the PBC's offers because allegedly he could get more money for fighting bums over here than fighting guys over there. Like, it's no offense against Andrade. It's highly unfortunate to see, what ended up happening to him. But a lot of that was his dumbass fault, to be quite honest with you. Anyway.
And then when he faced another one like Bud, we saw what happened. And this is why this is Canelo's most embarrassing loss. Because even though Floyd dominated Canelo more, Crawford, on the other hand, he faced more obstacles. Floyd only had to move up one weight division. Crawford moved up two, pretty much three, since he only had one fight at 154. Crawford did it.
And I would agree with that.
At an age of 38, Floyd did it at an age of 36. But Canelo was 23 with 42 fights when he fought Floyd, undefeated, unified champ. And now he's something like 62 wins, 3 losses, and 2 draws. But the key difference is whenever Canelo lost, he made excuses. When he lost to Floyd, he blamed it on being too young, inexperienced, even though Oscar wasn't.
Well, let me state this about Canelo Alvarez. I do think overall that he was not quite at his peak yet when he fought Floyd. And of course, the Bivol fight, I mean, to me, that's not even a debate. He should have never really been there in the first place. But if Canelo Alvarez was as great overall as what he thought he was in his mind, he should have been able to beat that possibly of a Dimitri Bivol. And he definitely should have been able to beat that of a Terence Bud Crawford.
Too experienced when he beat Chavez, nor was Devin and Tio when they beat Loma. They were 23. Nor was Floyd when he beat Corrales. Nor was Muhammad Ali and Mike Tyson when they became undisputed. Well, whether the excuse is...
Well, let me overall... my thing is about Mike Tyson is this. It's no offense about Mike Tyson, but we need to stop putting Mike Tyson really in a lot of these all-time great conversations. It's no offense, but Mike Tyson probably is the most overrated boxer of all time. Who did that man really ever beat to be put in these all-time great level conversations? I get it that the man was the youngest undisputed heavyweight champion of all time. Wilfredo Benitez also was like the youngest champion of all time. We don't ever put Wilfredo Benitez on the same level as a Mike Tyson. Now, Mike Tyson, of course, was someone that was undisputed. I don't know if Wilfredo Benitez ever was. But to be quite honest with you, Benitez had a bigger win in his career against that of a Roberto Duran probably than what Mike Tyson ever had in his whole entire career.
BS. Canelo, old media, and his fans ran with it till this freaking day. But when he lost to Bivol, he blamed it on moving up to his 4th weight class.
Well, right. Canelo Alvarez obviously doesn't belong there. But the point is that overall, in order for Canelo to be on certain levels like that of a Sugar Ray Leonard and other guys, he was going to have to beat that of a Crawford. It just is what it is. He wasn't able to defeat that of a Bivol or a Mayweather. I think that could be forgiven because Mayweather is looked at, in my view, as the most complete fighter of all time. And when you take a look at a Bivol, he's someone that is a top 5 pound-for-pound level fighter and someone that, of course, is, definitely bigger than Canelo. But the point overall is that there's no more excuses now that you lost to Crawford. And the point overall is that, now a lot of those quote-unquote valid excuses, for a lot of people, they're going to be a lot less valid, now that Canelo lost this fight. So this fight meant a lot for Canelo, but unfortunately for him, he could not pull it out.
Saying that I'm the best at 168. But then when Bivol said, listen, I'm willing to give you the rematch at 168, Canelo said, no, I'm not interested, and turned down the...
Right, but once again, AKHi TV, what was Canelo Alvarez supposed to do? Take that fight at 168, he beats Dimitri Bivol, and guys like you overall just claim that Canelo beats him overall at a weight drain. Or B, Canelo ends up losing that fight and it looks even worse. So, I mean, Canelo did the right thing.
Rematch with Bivol at 168. However, when it comes to the Crawford fight, there are no excuses. Canelo had all the advantages, being 4 years younger, 3 divisions bigger.
Canelo is not 3 divisions bigger than a Crawford. Sorry. But it is what it is. That being stated, he is big enough to the point to where he should have been able to win this fight had he been on the same level as a Crawford. And it's obvious now after this that, including me, that I was proven wrong, that Canelo is not on the same level as a Crawford. He's just not. Crawford at least has to be probably, at the very least a level above Canelo Alvarez, if not a couple levels.
Experience. Having the judges, the referee, the fans, the commentators, having everything.
Well, Canelo definitely did not have the commentators. No offense, but those commentators were awful throughout that whole entire fight. I mean, goddamn.
He was the A side. Crawford, on the other hand, he had no advantage. Not even being active. Nothing. However, he was still able to...
Well, Terence Bud Crawford did have the advantage of not having as much wear and tear. He also had the edge of someone that, overall, once again, like I stated, he had not fought quite as many A-grade level oppositions, in my view, or as much, but it doesn't really matter because Canelo was at a good enough point in his career to where he should have been able to win this fight, in my personal view.
Smoke Canelo. Which is why this is by far Canelo Alvarez's most embarrassing loss, because it debunked all the narratives that old media have been writing for years. Crawford single-handedly rewrote history with God help and broke the agenda machine by old media that tried to bury his shine. No
one really tried to bury Terence Bud Crawford's shine, unless you're just talking about mainly the Terence Bud Crawford haters. But once again, that's mainly the narrative that AKHi TV and these guys are going to be able to get away with now, because now they're going to look that much smarter than what they really actually are. I mean, it is what it is. But anyways, overall, once again, Canelo at one point in time did deserve to be #1 pound for pound, as well as Usyk, as well as Lomachenko. They just didn't last quite as long as some other guys. But Crawford, of course, was #1 for a bit after he beat that of Spence. And of course, right now, in my view, although some could debate Usyk, but in my view, Crawford deserves to be there. Usyk is someone that is phenomenal, and if you still put him as #1, I understand that. But I do think that Crawford, in my view, deserves it because he was able to become undisputed in 3 separate weight classes, and he definitely was not favored to win this fight. Although I think that a lot of people, including myself, could tell that, kind of with Canelo, recently, that this fight was a lot closer than what he used to be. But just taking a look at this fight, I'm not quite sure if even the Canelo from several years ago would have beat Crawford. But I could be wrong.
Forced to look at him and give him his props. So, why?
And of course, let me also state this. Crawford, in my view, is not at the absolute peak of his career either.
Is this Canelo's most embarrassing loss, even though Floyd dominated him more? The reason why is because, first of all, Crawford hurt Canelo more than Floyd did even. On top of that, it's a welterweight beating a super middleweight. That's why.
Well, it's really more of a welterweight beating that of a middleweight. That's really more what it is. Once again, Canelo's not really a natural super middleweight. He's someone that was astronomical and skilled enough to beat guys there. But when it came down to it, once again, Canelo's career is never going to be looked at as the same after this, and deservingly so. It is what it is.
That's why the loss is so embarrassing, because Canelo ran from Benavidez to lose to a welterweight. Not just any welterweight, but one that...
Once again, I need to really know why Mike Tyson is put on this list. Like, no offense, but Mike Tyson, in terms of comparative to any of these other fighters, he's not really close to the level of any of these other guys. I mean, it just is what it is, just in my personal view. I mean, the biggest win of his career is over Michael Spinks. I'll give him that. But other than that, it's like, name me another true A-grade level win in his career. Because it's not Tony Tubbs. It's not overall some of these other guys. Mike Tyson was a guy that basically lost every big, legit Hall of Fame level fighter that he ever fought. And I know people will say, well, he beat Trevor Berbick and Tony Tubbs and all those other guys. Those guys are not A-grade level fighters. I'm sorry.
Shares the same complexion as the same fighter Jamal Charlo, who Canelo requested the franchise belt for, aka the Duck Belt by the WBC. Now, credit to Canelo Alvarez. He didn't make any excuses after losing to Crawford. He stated that Crawford was the better man. Not just that, he believes that Crawford is the GOAT. He stated that Crawford is better than the GOAT himself, Floyd Mayweather, than the Michael Jordan of the sport, Floyd.
That definitely is, a great comparison. Just in my personal view, I don't, see Crawford above Floyd Mayweather, but if you were to debate it, it definitely would be understandable.
Extremely high praise. I think Canelo was being sincere because leading up to the fight, he said the same thing, but I don't know if he really believed that. However, after the fight, I think he believes that because...
I don't think he believed it before the fight, but I think after the fight that he does truly believe it.
He lost to a welterweight, and a welterweight hurt him. Yeah, Floyd was a welterweight, but they fought at 154, a division above. Here, they fought at 168. Crawford to hurt him. I don't know. Did he go Super Saiyan Ultra Instinct? What did he do? What form did Crawford accomplish in this fight? I'm telling you, man, this saying keeps breaking his limits. So put some respect on his name. Canelo made an excuse for every time he lost. So not seeing him being able to create an excuse shows you how great Crawford is. Even Canelo had to bow down to the king of boxing, Crawford. That being said, go ahead and drop your thoughts in the comments.
And that pretty much is about it for today. But congratulations to Mr. Terrence Bud Crawford. And of course, congratulations to Mr. Canelo Alvarez. Canelo still, of course, has an all-time great level career. He's just never going to be looked at as the same fighter ever again. And he shouldn't be. It is what it is. At the end of the day, Crawford moved them multiple weight classes to fight you. You were still at a good enough point in your career, in my personal view, to win this fight. And you pretty much clearly lost. So at the end of the day, Canelo is someone that is going to have to be looked at as not on the same level. It just is what it is. He's someone that, in my view, is going to be on that same level as guys like that of a Tommy Hearns, guys like that of a Bernard Hopkins at the most. It just is what it is. So probably within my top 30 to top 40 fighters of all time, and maybe even on the De La Hoya, Cotto, Mosley, and those guys' level, So he'd probably be around that level in my view. The Marquez, Barrera, Morales, overall Tommy Hearns, Oscar De La Hoya, Cotto, Mosley level. He'd be around, Hopkins level. He'd be around that level. I think that I would debate that he's probably around the level above guys like Cotto and De La Hoya, but he's around that level of a Tommy Hearns and a Bernard Hopkins. He's around there, but he can't be above those guys, in my view, or he cannot be, any higher than that realm. He's right on par with them, but he can never be any higher than that, because Tommy Hearns and Bernard Hopkins, they were, great fighters for their day, top 5 pound-for-pound fighters for their day, but you could never debate that they were ever the best of their era, ever. You can never debate that Tommy Hearns was over Sugar Ray. You can never debate that he was over Marvin Hagler. You can never debate that he was over Duran. And as for that of a Canelo Alvarez, you can never debate that he's over a Crawford. You can never debate that he's over an Usyk. And I mean, we'll see what happens with Inoue, but I still think Inoue needs a little bit more proving. So we'll see what ends up happening. But anyways, that pretty much is about it for today. But thank y'all so much for watching, and I'll talk to y'all later. And as for Bernard Hopkins, of course, let me not forget him. Although Bernard was a great fighter, you can never put him over Roy Jones Jr. You can never put him over Floyd Mayweather. You can never put him over Manny Pacquiao. And I'm sure that there's some other guys that I'm not mentioning as well. So Canelo, for his day, for the greatest fighters of his day, he's probably going to be around number 3 or number 4, depending on who you count for his generation. But he can never be number 1 or number 2. Not after this. It just is what it is. But anyways, that pretty much is about it for today. Thank y'all so much for watching, and I'll talk to y'all later.